And on these lakes where I grew up in Michigan, there's been a tendency over the years to put Roundup on your shoreline and then haul in beach sand. And you just watch over the years, like over the course of my lifetime, you just watch this like really like verdant, kind of like vibrant environment become increasingly like a swimming pool. In a lot of those lakes, man, and it's just been depressing to watch happen.
Yeah.
This guy Ron Spring, and for a living, he was a commercial bait fisherman. He would catch wigglers, minnows. He'd dig crawlers, catch leeches, and he would supply bait and tackle shops with live bait. And he had Spring Sporting Goods where he sold his own live bait. And he would even hire women to sew what's called a spawn sack, where you take little bits of pieces of salmon eggs, and sew them into a little mesh bag for steelhead bait. He was just in the bait business, but also was a fishing fanatic and lived off fish his whole life. So he was living off Great Lakes fish his whole life. And the University of Montana started trying to track down old timers who'd eaten like enormous quantities of Great Lakes fish to test them for heavy metals exposure. Okay, and other toxic things are in the environment. And he'd lived his whole life like me with like a complete defiance of health advisory suggestions about fish consumption. And he goes down there and he would go in every month or two for these little batteries of tests. And one of the things they would do with them is they would tell him, they'd give him a grocery list. And they'd be like, hey, you got to go to the store and buy like bread, eggs, cheese, butter, whatever. And then they'd wait a minute and they'd say, what were you supposed to buy at the store? You know, and he's telling me this story, and he told me, I was laughing, he said, Steve, I wouldn't have remembered that list if I never ate a piece of fish in my life.
So they were trying to like gauge his memory based on the amount of heavy metal in his body?
Yeah, they were trying. I would have fish fries. And when you fried fish in the Great Lakes, there's no person in the Great Lakes region that I was aware of. Like in Michigan, there's no person that would even kind of give a shit about these restrictions. They would be surprised to hear that there were any kind of restrictions. But like the way the different sentiments and different mentalities run, in Seattle, you'd have people that they're like, you caught it where? Lake Washington? No way. Right? Just like a level of awareness from like an urban environment about those kind of toxins. And growing up, where I grew up, it was just not a thing that people discussed. Even though they're right in the fishing regs.
I took a few months off and I came back, no arsenic.
Yep.
I was like, oh man. He goes, it's not enough to be concerned, but you're getting arsenic in your blood from these sardines.
Yeah. I work with a guy, Seth, and he kind of had this perfect storm where we had been in Hawaii, so we had wahoo and yellowfin tuna, and he fishes in Alaska, so he had all his halibut. And then he's got a bunch of walleye that he catches. He's a big walleye fisherman that he catches locally. And he wound up had like there's like kind of like a long-term mercury deal and a short-term mercury deal. But he had mercury poisoning. His hands went numb and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And then I got reading about